Hello, everyone. Good morning, good day, or good evening, depending on which time zone you're in. My name is Malički, and I'm going to be the panel leader for today. I am a research scholar at the Stanford University. I work at the Stanford program on research rigor and reproducibility, but my biggest passion has always been peer review and the quality of peer review, and the changes that are brought on by peer review during the publication process. I'm also the chair of the East Peer Review Committee, and in this role that I'm very happy and honored to have organized this panel on AI in peer review. We are here to talk about the quality of the AI review reports and all of these new things that I think, like my feeds, you're probably overwhelmed every day with new AI discoveries. And what I hear from other people is that if we thought that we've seen a lot of new stuff in the last 6 months, then the next 6 months are expected to be even crazier in this year. So I think, there's a little bit of techno optimism on my side. I hope that this will lead to improvements in both health and research in general. But it's very exciting to be able to talk about some of those improvements today and have great selections of 3 panelists. But before I introduce our panelists, I would like to first introduce Mary and Lucy, who are members of EASE and who are our background support, and they will help me run and coordinate everything. And I invite all of you to introduce yourselves in the chat by writing your name and maybe what is your role and even in your interests in being in this panel. And while we'll do so, I'll also ask Mary to run our little poll. It's only 2 questions to kick us off of the people who are presented sort of here. Thank you. The first question was only about people's role, and were you an editor of a journal? Are you an author or a reviewer, or maybe a researcher, just to get a sort of a sense of who our audience is today. And now allow me to introduce our 3 wonderful speakers. We have Arjun Manrai. He's an assistant professor of biomedical informatics at Harvard University, and he works for the New England Medical Journal, where they have started publishing fast-track papers that are reviewed both by a human reviewer and by AI reviews, and that will be his presentation. Then we have Natalie Khalil, who's the CEO of Review at 3, and will present their work on producing AI reviews and how they help. And then it is also my honor to introduce Mark Hahnel, who you may have known as, and he has also introduced himself here in the chat, but he has been in the publishing world for quite some time and is behind Figshare and is now presenting his preprint AI and the project that are running the Validate project on preprints. Each of our speakers will present for 7 to 10 minutes, and then we'll have an open Q&A. During the presentations, you are more than welcome to post questions in the chat, but we will address them after the presentations. So Arjun, if you're ready, we'll kick it off with you.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. I'm going to try to share my slides. And all right, I'm trying to make those big screen. Can you see those okay?
Yes. Thank you.
Fantastic. All right. So great to be here. So I'm joining from Boston. So it's bright and early, 7 a.m. right now. Kids just woke up getting ready for school. And so good morning to you all. I think a lot of you are a couple hours ahead in the day in Europe, so great to be with you all. As was mentioned, I'm a professor at Harvard Medical School, and then I'm also a senior deputy editor at NEJMAI. And so this is the artificial intelligence focused journal from the publishers in the New England Journal of Medicine. And I'll be speaking about, both our mandate at NEJMAI, which is to review AI papers that are relevant to medicine. But then also some of the experiments that we've been doing and changes we've been making to our peer review process in the past year or 2. So this is a paper that we published, that we were proud to publish last fall. And it's a randomized controlled trial of ambient artificial intelligence. And this is specifically, this is AI that's been really, I think, quite widely trialed and adopted by health systems in the United States and outside of the United States, which is called, you might think of these as sort of digital scribes or AI that's listening in on the doctor-patient encounter and trying to summarize, write a note that's useful, about the encounter itself and ideally save time for the physician while providing sort of a high fidelity representation of the encounter itself. And we started this journal because we were excited about a lot of the medical AI work that was being published, but we didn't really see a sort of a single home for clinical grade evidence in the form primarily of RCTs, but also other types of studies that I'll talk about in a few moments for AI that's being used in care, that's being researched as potentially useful in clinical care or other parts of the healthcare system. So we're excited when we get RCTs of major technology that like digital scribes that are being widely used. So this paper went through peer review, it was revised, and then we were proud to publish it last fall. It had there's a nice editorial. It was written by some health systems leaders, chief health AI officers, and others at various major health systems in the United States, and it was covered well also in the news. And again, emphasis on the sort of quality of the evidence here around this open question around what digital scribes actually contribute to clinical care, but in randomized setting as opposed to primarily observational or difference in difference models and other types of analyses that had been published before. So we were happy to see all this. And this is, from the look of it, a normal paper that any GMAI published in its original articles, just like every other paper. But this paper was very different. It went through a different review process. It's the first paper to actually go through a partial AI process where AI was used in peer review to accelerate the publication of this paper. And so there's another accompanying editorial we wrote where we really outlined as transparently as possible how we approached this, what our process was. And this is very deliberately titled. This is really a human plus AI review process. So this is not hypothetical, not futuristic, not a sort of retrospective benchmark. We actually use this in evaluating this paper, and we used it to fast track the decision. So this was 7 days from submission by the authors to decision, where decision means accept, reject, or revise of the paper. And so the author submitted on August 20th, and within 7 days, I think actually it was technically at 6 days, we reached a decision. And our process was review first and foremost by a human editor. So this was me. I was handling this paper, but I wrote a review of this paper as sort of a peer reviewer before I fed the paper into any other model. And then we had two separate AI models. And so these were, I think, two of the sort of leading frontier models at the time. There's probably a more advanced version of GPT-5 now that we would use. So this is GPT-5. And they used to say, they used to describe this as sort of with thinking. So we're being a little bit silly here by saying the editor is also employing thinking at the same time while writing the human review. And then we used a separate model, separate company. This is Google's model, Gemini, and one of the leading models at the time, again, 2.5 Pro, to prepare a separate review. So 3 reviews altogether. And then if you've been a part of any GM or any GMAI's review process, this is certainly my favorite part of the whole process of being an editor. We meet and we meet every week and we discuss every single original article that has a chance of being published. And we really have what I think is sort of the best journal club that I've ever been a part of, where we really spar and debate the clinical relevance and also the methodological novelty in any paper that we're considering publishing. And I helped start the journal and I'm now a senior editor there. And I have to say, I think just my experience anecdotally, this was probably the most scrutinized and critiqued paper of any that I've personally presented and handled as an editor at NHMAI. I think people were extra aware because they knew that AI was partially reviewed or partially used in this process. And of course, this is a very important topic, using, an RCT for digital scribes that I think would be considered robust evidence by many in the community. And so people are very aware of the importance of that as well. And I should say, I didn't mention it yet, we did this with permission from the authors. So the first thing we did was we saw this paper, it came in, and we were excited about it. We thought it had a high chance for potential publication, and it might be reviewed favorably. And so we offered the authors that we'll use AI to partially review your paper, but we'll accelerate the sort of decision-making process to be 7 days from submission to decision. And this was accepted. It was conditional on revisions they would have to make, meritorious revisions, but it was accepted after the 7 days. Again, conditional on those revisions. So we published the reviews for this paper, both the human and the AI reviews, and we also published the response to the reviewers by the authors. It's been a couple months. I think because I was preparing this presentation a couple days ago, I know which one of these is the human reviewer and which two of these are the AI reviews. But I would venture a guess that if you just read these and you read the paper, it might be pretty hard to tell which one's the human here and which are the two AI reviewers. We do indicate this in the supplement of the paper, the supplement of the editorial, if you're sort of interested in reading the full reviews. And again, this would have been science fiction to me just a year or two ago, but it's not only the AI reviews that are published in there in the human review, the authors are responding to the human and to the AI reviewers like they do with an entirely sort of human written or human guided review process with point by point responses. And the AI models I think there's a lot of overlap between the three reviewers, but the AI models are picking up things that I missed as the human reviewer, and I think they're not emphasizing everything that I pointed out, and they missed some things that I pointed out in my human review as well. But there was a lot of overlap. I think this is an example of this interpretation of this work outside of work, reduction in sensitivity to outliers. We are very particular at NEJM and NEJM for being very careful with not overstating things about secondary outcomes, making sure things are pre-registered, checking the statistical analysis plan, and so on. And so we're very sensitive to overclaims of secondary outcomes, for example. And you see the AI reviewer picking up on that, and this was also in my review as well. And then the authors change in their language and also change in which of the results they included in the paper. I have to say, this is a 70-some page editorial supplement, probably the longest supplement that I've ever been a part of or I've seen in an editorial. So again, we include the human and the AI reviews for this paper. We include their responses with their permission again. I share the prompt for generating the reviews that was used for both the AI models. Then, if you wanted to guess when you were reading the reviews, you could have guessed for the first part. But if you want to look at the identity of the human AI reviewers, you can see that in the sort of the middle of the supplement. And then our statistical editor took a different approach, which I'll show you in a moment. But we also share the chat log between the statistician at NEJM AI and ChatGPT. So all I did, and this is a very simple prompt, this is to show you, I think, the power here. I think there is something to the sort of scaffolding and tools and the data flywheel of sorts that's being built on top of the foundation models. But I think the power for this work is coming from the foundation model itself. I am writing a very simple prompt that I've shared in the supplement and that I've put here. And really, this is again to be transparent and also to help build, with openly in the community here. We tell the model what its role is. You're an expert reviewer for NEJM AI. Very briefly, I don't want to distract the model, what NEJM AI is. And then the format that I want, a summary, major comments, minor comments, and overall assessment. If you've used these models, they can be very loquacious, overly talkative. And so we want to really sort of focus in. We don't want it to be overly verbose. So we ask it to write concisely, professionally, and in the tone of a rigorous but constructive peer review. As authors, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, there are very different tones that come in your peer reviews. And I think rigorous but constructive is the one that generally is most helpful for us as an editor, and I think also most helpful for the authors typically as well. And then we ask the AI models to also make a recommendation, just as we do for our human reviewers, encourage publication, minor revision, major revision, or discourage publication not suitable for NEJM AI. And those were also made by the models as well. Our statistical reviewers, so these are basically one-shotted for the AI models. So we just used that prompt. We used a paper, and then the AI models provided a review. But our statistical editor took a different approach, which I thought was very interesting. And the full chat logs in the supplement, where is an amazing stats editor that we're very lucky to have at NEJMAI, who also is one of the statistical editors for the main New England Journal of Medicine, Joe Hogan. And he had a full conversation with ChatGPT about the paper. And I think he would agree with this. He did very interesting things in that conversation, including providing the protocol and statistical analysis plan, which if you've run these types of studies or trials, these can be very dense, 100, 200-page protocols, which I'm going to make the argument are rarely scrutinized in detail through the peer review process. And so I think this is even opening up a sort of a new level of analysis and a deeper form of analysis that is sort of iterative, that was guided by our statistician, our statistical editor. The paper was covered, not only the paper findings were covered, but also this approach to evaluating papers in peer review was covered in some interesting articles outside of the United States, within the US as well. And so I use ChatGPT. If anyone speaks French, they can confirm this or tell me how bad this is. But we use ChatGPT to just translate one of these articles. And what I thought was very interesting is they interviewed me, and so they had a quote or two from me about the process and my experience with it. But much more importantly than me, they had the author's perspective. And I think this was guidance given to me by moderator today, where Majid Afshar, Dr. Majid Afshar is the first author of the paper. His experiences, the reports were fair and reasonable, but nevertheless, he would not accept a fully automated evaluation. I prefer humans to continue approving the critiques. And I think we went a few steps beyond this. We also had a human draft the first review before even feeding the paper into a chatbot. And then we had, I think, also very importantly, a full, sparring process at our weekly editorial meeting where we debated, we looked at the human and AI reviews. People read the paper, we debated the merits of the paper, and then decided to move forward only after that. So I'm going to just wrap up here, and just to tell you generally, if you're interested in any GMAI, I encourage you to read this editorial. We started this journal because we really want randomized controlled trials, rigorous evaluations of AI in clinical care and in healthcare, the same level of scrutiny that we apply to any clinical intervention, as our editor-in-chief writes. So, what we would expect of new drugs or devices, we want to see us move towards rigorous evaluations of AI the same way. But we do publish lots of other types of studies, benchmarks, technological breakthroughs, evaluations of algorithmic bias, and so on. This is an example. This was entirely human reviewed well before we started this fast track process, where it's now a highly cited multimodal paper that really sort of switched the conversation from, I think, primarily text-based to increasingly multimodal foundation models that are potentially useful across, again, not just text reasoning, but other types of data as well. We in one of our very first papers that we published was an editorial where I think a lot of folks at the time were pretty negative about using LLMs in submissions. We made clear that we were positive, but with the caveats that authors are still responsible and completely responsible for the output or for the submissions, and that they're also disclosing the use of LLMs. On topic for today, we've also published an interesting analysis by James Zhu and colleagues where they conducted a large-scale analysis of the quality of LLM reports in Nature Family and other journals as well. And then finally, if you're interested in this topic and learning more about both AI and peer review, but also AI and medicine generally, we have a interesting podcast that's affiliated with the journal as well that I would encourage you to check out. All right, I will stop there and hand it back to Mario.
Thank you so much. So for everyone else, please feel free to write the questions in the Q&A by clicking on more, and then you have the Q&A questions, and we'll continue now with Natalie.
Awesome. I'll share my screen. Can everyone see this all right? Awesome. Okay, so my name is Natalie. I'm a co-founder of Reviewer3, which is an AI manuscript review platform, and I'll be sharing some of our benchmarking work. But I guess the reason we founded Reviewer3 was because of this sustainability crisis facing our peer review system. The number of research papers is growing exponentially. It had surpassed 7 million DOI indexed articles on OpenAlex in 2025 alone. And AI tools for writing research papers is obviously accelerating this research output. But at the same time, our existing reviewer pool is limited. 75% of journal editors have said that finding reviewers and getting them to accept invitations is one of the hardest parts of their job. And since our launch of Reviewer 3 in June, we've seen a lot of new AI reviewers enter the space, a lot of really cool experiments with frontier LLMs and other AI tools in real publishing workflows. But it's very difficult to compare these to one another in a standardized way, both AI to human and then also the different AI tools against one another. And that's partly due to the fact that review formats are very unstructured, so they're hard to directly compare. And so that's why we built Review Bench. Essentially, if a venue provides publicly available human peer reviews, we can fetch that along with the papers. We can standardize it into the language of our benchmark, which was parsing the review letters into individual comments, and then organizing the papers. We can generate AI reviews off of them, and then we can compare everything. And so in comparing human and AI, as well as AI against AI, we were interested both in kind of systemic differences between human and AI reviewers, and then also some of the performance and quality. So one of the first things we looked at was comment structure. So each comment was further parsed again into the specific issue identified, the justification, so rationale for why that was an issue, a proposed remedy if it was present, and an anchor to a location in the text if present. We also looked at the types of critique provided from a fixed taxonomy of validity, sufficiency, contribution, clarity, and transparency. And then we did some claim mapping where we mapped individual comments to the major claims within a paper, assigned them a stance of supportive, critical, or neutral. And then in order to distinguish fundamental concerns from minor issues like typos that might have been identified, we assigned this additional consequential label, which was true if the comment could undermine the mapped claim. And so all of this, the parsing, critique typing, and the mapping, this labeling was done by an LLM evaluator. And this is our data set. So we looked at 2,142 papers across 3 disciplines. So we looked at iClear, a computer science venue, Nature Human Behavior, which is social science, and then eLife, which is life sciences. We generated and parsed 145,000 human and AI review comments. And across venues, you can see some of what Raj was saying earlier of GPT is very verbose. It generated a lot of comments just in one shot in a minimal peer review this prompt with the given paper. Even more than Reviewer 3, which is a multi-agent system that pulls together the output of multiple reviewers. Human length varied across venue due to venue-specific formatting differences. So iClear, for example, lets reviewers respond in kind of bulleted shorthand, and so they tend to produce shorter but greater in quantity comments. So the first thing we looked at was that comment structure. I'm showing both the justification rate and the actionability, which is based on whether or not the comments included a suggested remedy. And you can see that across the board, AI reviewers are more structured than human as expected, with Reviewer 3 leading on these 2 metrics. We then mapped comments to major claims within a paper and then assigned them a stance. And you can also see something that you might have experienced personally, but AI reviewers tend to be more critical, just as they can be very sycophantic if you tell them, to agree with you, they can also take on that very adversarial role and produce highly critical feedback. And then we looked at comments that mapped the same claims as human comments, and then what percent of the time do the AI reviewers have the same stance as human? And we found that reviewer 3 and GPT agreed more often with humans. It was 65 to 81% of the time. GPT led on average, and reviewer 3 per paper across the venues. And then again, to distinguish kind of minor concerns from really fundamental issues with the claim that the comment was mapped to, we added this additional Boolean consequential label that labeled comments capable of undermining the mapped claim. And we were surprised to see that AI reviewers surpassed humans on this metric on average. And when we started to look at the distribution, we saw that there was a lot of variance in the human spread. Reviewer 3 led on this metric, 87.9 to 93.2% of feedback had the potential to undermine the mapped claim. And then to try to understand this a bit better, we looked, I'm showing you data from the iClear venue, so that's the computer science venue. Their API returns reviewer IDs as well as paper decisions, so we have access to rejected papers as well. And when we plot the distribution by the individual human reviewers, even when we account for paper decision, which is like a crude control for quality, we see a peak of human reviewers whose review letters are almost 0% consequential, as well as a peak near 100%, again, regardless of paper quality. And then on these graphs, we also have the mean plotted for the different AI reviewers. And this kind of also maybe depicts something that you might have experienced, which is the best human reviewers absolutely outperform AI on average, but the worst bring the human average down. And then the last thing we did was to label the type of critique provided by each comment. And what we noticed was across venues, AI reviewers tended to focus on technical checks. So they commented mostly on validity, sufficiency, and transparency, while humans devoted more comments than AI reviewers to contribution and clarity, which are things that require taste and scientific judgment. And so, kind of our biggest takeaway was that peer review is really two parts. It is both objective and it is subjective. Objective review is verifiable, and there is a ground truth. Is the claim supported by the evidence presented? Are the statistics correct? Do the references exist? Are some other compliance checks? Whereas subjective peer review might come from years of experience within research and has more to do with kind of taste and scientific judgment, including whether the work is a good fit for your journal, if it's novel or significant, and whether it advances the field. And so together, these findings kind of demonstrate that human and AI reviews are quite complementary. AI can definitely scale the technical verification and surface significant issues that we've defined as consequential to major claims. And implementing them, similar to NEJM AI does with their complementary model, can help reduce the burden on our review system, as well as accelerate time to decision. I'll go ahead and stop sharing.
Thank you, Natalie. That was wonderful. And lastly, we have Mark. So Mark, if you're ready, and the same as applies, please, everyone, feel free to post questions either in the chat or in the Q&A. And please maybe name the specific panelist if you would like, one of them to specifically answer the question.
Okay.
So Mark, take us off.
Yeah, hopefully everybody can see my screen. Yep. No?
You're in the presenter mode, so I would say that you do the full screen and then
Yeah, I thought I had, but it gave me a little.
There it is. Wonderful.
It gives me a little pop-up. All good now?
Perfect.
Thank
you.
Let's go. Hi, everybody. My name is Mark Hahnel. I'm the founder of Figshare, which is it was originally a data publication platform that anybody can use, and then we expanded it to all types of content. And as a result of seeing people publishing stuff that are non-traditional research outputs. It can be posters, presentations, data sets, but also preprints. We saw what happened with around the middle of last year, beginning of last year, seeing lots of submissions. We have no peer review. We have a curation process that involves removing spam. But we also saw that, Figshare content was showing up in the Google AI results. So it was being treated as facts, even though it wasn't necessarily peer reviewed. And that was problematic. And another problem was that a lot of people were starting to create AI assisted research. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but we got a lot of strange submissions, the physics of underwater Jesus and things like this. And as such, I was thinking, well, how can we're not the gatekeepers here, so how can we curate this in some way? And one of the things we did was we start asking LLMs on submissions that fitted that, whether this was, uh, basic science, a research output, or whether it was something more pseudo-scientific. And it was really good. It solved a lot of the problems. We got to the point where we had a lot of conversations with other preprint servers, Archive and the like. And there was a lot of people suggesting, how dare we become gatekeepers? How dare Archive become gatekeepers? And we've now seen that Archive has, if you fabricate citations, you get a year ban from Archive. So we're starting to see more layers of checks put in around the preprint level. At the same time, we've seen lots of innovation in the space. We've seen eLife come along with publish, curate, review model, and we've seen um, we've seen lots of ways in which we can be um, checking the uptake of preprints across the medical sciences and bioarchive and medRxiv and things like this. So with AI coming along, there's a huge wish for people to be moving further, faster with academic publishing. How fast can we publish? Amazing to see Raj's talk there about within 7 days. I love that. For a long time, I've thought that peer review is the bottleneck on a lot of these things. And I was on a talk just before Christmas where somebody said, how much of the academic process can AI replicate, reproduce, save us time on? And so I just started experimenting, and this is the results of one of those experiments. It is an experiment, it is nothing more. It is not a product, it is not for sale. And so I wanted to check if we could, what is the current state of um, making preprints more trustworthy or putting out some signals to make preprints more trustworthy. I wrote a blog post called Academia Has a Preprints Problem that was the start of some of this. So we heard a lot of this from Natalie. There's a lot of content coming out there. The signal to noise ratio has degraded. In the year 2000, there was 2 million publications per year. Now we're at 8 million publications per year. There's not 4 times as many researchers. So who is doing all of that peer review, or is it a lesser quality of peer review? And so what I tried to create was a quality signal for preprints. And this is the grading scale I've come up with. It's got 2 layers to it. One is research integrity. My colleague at Digital Science, Leslie McIntosh, has come up with something called trust markers in the past. Can we infer trust around a paper based on things like, does it have a data availability statement? Does it have an ethics statement? And so there's these markers of trust you can start to look for. And so the second thing is novelty, and we've used journals as a way to kind of like track. It's basically rejection rate more than novelty when you're trying to train things. But it also tries to pick up pseudoscience and paper mills and things like this. So on the one hand, you could use things like this, a grading score to use it as a triage for publication if you're a publisher. But realistically, I think we can be thinking about this as a iterative process in the future of how do I not every paper can be novel or should be novel. We should have lots of tier five novelty papers in my own graded thing here, but we should also have we should aim to have as good research integrity as possible. So I think you can start aiming towards A, and there might be ways in which you can move up. So say if your preprint gets a C6, you might be able to move it up to a B3 based on feedback. And we might enter a world where, you only train your local models on A1 preprints, but in order to have the very latest research data that's at some level trustable. So these are kind of thought experiments I'm playing with to see whether it's doable. There's 4 layers to it. There's 10 agents having a chat. And then there's some convergence and arbitration in terms of what they're trying to do, seeing whether the agents agree with each other. We use a variety of I've used a variety of different agents, some local, some LLMs. The interesting thing here, I always think, what are the flaws with a model like this? And you could say, well, we saw already some of the models, oh, I use this model, which they now have a better model. And so this idea that, well, hold on, if I start reviewing papers now and give them a score, and 6 months from now we're using a completely different set of models, then how can you normalize that? And on the one hand, I think, it's hard to normalize, but it's just a signal, it's not factual. And on the other hand, I think, well, what's the current situation with academic peer review? Is every peer review there's going to be a gradient in terms of how big of an expert they are. There's going to be a gradient in terms of how senior they are and how many they hand off to their PhD students. And there's going to be, so you already have a lot more variety than this in the system. Because of the local models, you get a review in about 5 minutes. It spits out a lot of stuff. It gives you a score, like I say. And it gives you feedback if you're an author to say, you could have fixed this by trying to do this. There's some problems with what you have. I've done about 4, I pulled the whole of bioRxiv and medRxiv and just started working through them. And we're over 4,000 papers, and this is what it looks like. So one of the things I would say is that there's likely to be more of a bell curve in the novelty score based on, the training on the types of publications that are accepted in different journals, because you get almost an even distribution there. But at the same time, the A2E research integrity score should not have any normal distribution because it is a binary thing of the, fact checking. We've learned over time as well, I've learned over time as well, that there needs to be more nuance added, even if you try and limit the field to, say, bioRxiv, which you can say is about 50 different top level field of research codes. Then you have unique workflows and unique ways that things happen in different research fields. So it might be, if we're giving you less of a grade because you don't have a data availability statement. Data, in my opinion, means files. So are you making the files available with the paper? Not every paper is going to have data. You expect every medical one to have data, but not everyone does. We can pull out the major claims and verify the major claims. We offer a revision roadmap. We know that the panel isn't being polite from training on eLife open reviews and trying to normalize against that. I thought there was going to be a lot of, you're absolutely right. This is groundbreaking. Um, so we know it's not polite. I'll share these slides after. I'm just trying to whiz through because there's a lot of heavy text in here. Um, the tests I've done so far in terms of if you, again, it's a slightly skewed study, but I was trying to understand, can you predict where this paper ends up, right? Is an A1 paper going to end up in Nature? And based on the small number, the 4,000 we have, Crossref has a system that links preprints to publication venues and publications. And so try to normalize against that. And it's a problematic setup to begin with because the preprint is largely not what gets published at the end. There's probably revisions in there based on peer review that might fundamentally change the paper. Plus, you might iterate anyway. So it's not a great marker to understand where the publication is going to be published in terms of impact. That's one interesting finding. And some of the issues I see with it going forward are there's hallucinated weaknesses. By having 10 reviewers with 10 different models, then hopefully that norm you can get around that. But we saw with the citations that there's still hallucination in 2% of citations generated by LLMs in the best case. Yeah, there's also this is quite a weird conceptual thing to think about when you're trying to rank novelty, is if it's truly novel, then it's never been done before. Then it's very hard for any LLM to comprehend something is truly novel because it's got no training basis on which to suggest that. If you have a new fundamental theory of physics, it's very hard to train back on that. And author identity. We don't say it's a strange question. What I like about this project is it raises more questions. Is if you're looking at trust markers, if somebody who's at MIT who's won the Nobel Prize publishes a paper, you're probably going to trust it instinctively a little bit, whereas somebody from a university I've not heard of in a country I'm not too familiar with who doesn't have a publishing record is you might suggest that has less trust behind it, which you'd probably be right with, but it doesn't mean that you can make a sweeping statement about it. So my sum up based on this experiment is AI peer review is further along than you might think and more limited than it admits. I am an optimist in this space, and I think that whatever we're talking about today will be massively out of date in a year, and I cannot see a world in which AI peer review is not. I think obviously we'll always have humans in the loop. We'll need humans in the loop, but I think AI can do a lot of the heavy lifting here. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for all of our panelists. Now I want to highlight that these three panelists have been invited because they were among the first people in the world to post and publicly post and comments in comparing AIs. Recently, there have been studies, and I'll post them a little bit later in the chat, that have came out on preprint that are comparing from different platforms and different journals, AI and AI produced by peer reviewers and those evaluated by humans. So I really do believe we're at the beginning of this, where we're going to see more and more research on this. So I'm extremely grateful that we have all three of you. I have a bunch of questions, but I'm going to delay them because otherwise we'll go forever. So I'll pick a few from the ones that have been posted in the Q&A and the chat, but I also would encourage all three of you have time to maybe directly answer some of those, both in the chat and in the Q&A. And I'll start in the order of the presenters. And so Arjun, for you, there was a question on how scalable do you think for journals like New England Medical Journal would it be to do human plus AI reviews and then plus discussions or editorials of scrutinizing all of this? Because you yourself mentioned this is one of the longest, supplements, and who is going to be reviewing those supplements and how are we going to, share everything about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think part of the process is highly scalable, and part of the process is deliberately slow and not easy to sort of automate away or not easy to scale. And so I think that sort of underlying message in all three of our talks is that there is a lot of signal here. There's a lot of quality in these AI reports. But I think all three of us emphasize the role of humans still ultimately in this process. And so journals operate differently. NEJM actually operates differently than I think many other leading journals, where every single paper is discussed live by humans. And I don't think that's going away. I think this is a way for us to make that a more informed discussion and for us to sort of deliberate with more data and to deliberate faster, where I mean faster, not necessarily in how long we discuss that paper, but faster from the point at which the author submits the paper to where we make a decision and where it gets shared with the world. And so I think that process of AI, sort of the AI review side of this, that's trivially scalable, right? I think we can apply this to everything. One thing I didn't mention is that we only are using our fast track with very select invited papers. So these are really papers that we saw on preprint servers. So cool to see Mark's talk and sort of emphasizing kind of doing this at the preprint level. But there are papers that either we see on preprint servers that we are excited about as editors, or they're papers that are submitted to us and that we just started doing this, that that were submitted to us regular and we're now sort of offering for the fast track. And so this is sort of a step to enrich the pool with papers that we think are already high quality to begin with. And therefore kind of take sort of an easier step to begin with implementing this live. But I think that side, the AI side of this is, of course, very scalable. I think the human side is still very deliberate. And yes, the supplement was 70 pages, but this was a lot of this was just to share transparently materials for people who want to see it. And because I think there was skepticism, honestly, not only amongst some of the folks outside of our journal, but there's a lot of skepticism from some of our editors as well. And so this was by those of us who were pushing for this experiment, this was a needed step to assure even our fellow editors that we're doing this responsibly. This is what these look like. We're not guarding away these reports. This is the quality of the report, and go judge for yourself, how that report compares to what you typically get in peer review, or even what I wrote as a sort of human peer reviewer before we involved AI.
And I'll pick one from the chat for you as well before I move to Natalie. And that was, they asked that the New England Medical Journal, says that all of your papers are reviewed in the instructions to authors by 2 reviewers, and this sort of seems to contradict that. Do you think there needs to be a separate section or a clarification in the instructions to authors because of the fast track?
Yeah, so we published this editorial where we laid out exactly what we did. I think we linked to it in the instructions for authors as well. There are 3 reports here. I mean, I'm not going to debate whether we consider AI to be a peer or not. I don't think it's my peer, but it is sort of it is for the purposes of this, a sort of another source of review. And so I think what's most important, so we do link to that process. We're very transparent about that. Again, these are being applied to sort of very select papers with the author's permission, and then with a process that's laid out in sort of excruciating detail in both the editorial and in the supplement. But it clearly is different. And I should say also that, I think there's another question that's related to that one. It's impossible for us to, I think there are some instances in which this could happen, but it's very hard typically for us to reach a decision within a week if we are relying on sort of the standard peer review model. So any editor on the call will know this. Even if you're lucky enough to have reviewers agree to review the paper, you often have to chase. They often take a couple weeks, and it takes a couple weeks afterwards. This process is so unbelievably challenging and honestly broken, right? Reviewers are typically not compensated. They're doing this sort of voluntarily. They're doing this to sort of, to make sure that there's quality in the sort of scientific publication process. But the process itself is very, very, very challenging, the human-based process. And I can't imagine us sort of doing in any type of sort of general fast track mechanism, having a time from submission to decision without AI in 7 days or on that time scale without using sort of these models as well. So that, the editorial supplement, everything is linked there, and we're transparent about the process here. But I guess this does hinge on whether this is a peer or not.
Natalie, and could you tell us a little bit about your benchmarking process? And did you think about comparing hallucinations? And now we read with the archive policy also about, wrong references. And I think that something we haven't discussed across all publishing system is what would be the essential things that we say the sort of AI checks for versus a human reviewer. And have you considered some other benchmarks on top of the ones that you've done?
Yeah, so I think so. We haven't yet measured hallucinations or correctness in a large scale benchmark, but the archive policy is interesting because we do have a hallucinated reference checker. That's one of our reviewers that we've built out, and so on the one hand, AI is hallucinating, and on the other hand, we're building AI to detect hallucinations. So it's really an arms race, I think. In terms of what AI is good at, I think as long as you stick to objective and verifiable checks, you can engineer systems that can measure and improve. And so like something like just assessing novelty, there's no real ground truth for that. So it's hard to know how, your model changes or develops over time if you change your LLM configuration. And so for us, it's been sticking to things kind of like the NEJMAI's experiment of having the statistician automate some of those objective and verifiable checks through the use of AI assistance. Um, yeah, I think also on the note of hallucination with our system, we build solutions around it. So we have verifying agents come in, and we have one specifically focused on hallucinations that drops comments that can't be grounded in the text or in the literature. And so with that one, we notice it's dropping around 1 in 100 comments, which is pretty similar and comparable to frontier model hallucination rates, which I think are somewhere between 1% and 2% nowadays.
And then a question for Mark, and I think it relates even for New England Medical Journals. You specified which two models that you use. There's so many models coming out, and there's so many even different now AI review models coming out on the things. How difficult it is to trust some of these findings. And I know you said that in even in your finishing thing, you don't know what happens let alone in 6 months, and that the world will be different. But is there when you were using your models, how sure were you that they would be good enough to sort of answer the questions that you wanted, or how quickly you would need to update them to get the comparisons?
Yeah, there's obviously different levels and different qualities. And I think, we're only a couple of years into this space and we're using it for very niche ideas. And so I think we will see more, like Natalie was talking about, contextualized workflows and contextualized models. And at Digital Science, we have, we've got a knowledge graph company called MetaFacts. And I remember being knowledge graphs, semantic web being about kind of, 10, 15 years ago. And it was almost like, this is really cool, but it's almost like a solution looking for a problem. And now it's exploding because of the need for, I just want to train my models on facts, you know? It's pretty, there's pretty easy for fixes. If you're talking about, I just want to make sure that none of these citations are hallucinated. Well, you can easily run that and check on Crossref or dimensions or even OpenAlex to some extent, right? So it's a very fixable problem that's not at the top of Claude's list or not at the top of ChatGPT's list. So I think it'll get there eventually, but in the meantime, we'll also have a lot of these localized, more context specific kind of either gems or models or ways in which or MCPs to improve the orchestration that we have. I think the speed at which the big models are getting better as well is also great for some of the more arbitrational handling of different agents talking to one another, so to speak. I remember Frontiers doing this where they released you do your peer review and then you all get opened up into a portal to discuss whether you're going to accept the paper or not accept the paper. And that was revolutionary 10 years ago. And now it's like, yeah, you can just spin up 50 agents. So
and one question, maybe I'll lead for all three of you, and feel free to jump in, whoever wants to. But it was anonymous, one of our attendees who didn't put their names, asked, how do we ensure that human reviewers can actually now validly evaluate the AI reviewers? Because we often talk that there's a lack of training for reviewers in general, and yet now we're also confronted with AI reviewers, and who's to judge both the human or the AI reviewers as being either good or bad?
I'm just going to jump in quickly and say editors.
So no preprints? And I'm joking. But yes, it's yeah.
I mean, I think I agree. I think editors do take responsibility for sort of judging the quality of review reports generally, right? And I think that extends to AI era and to what's sort of admissible evidence into the editor's discussion and what is sort of to be too lawyerly. I'm married to a lawyer, so what's sort of prejudicial and sort of biases us here. So I think that's probably going to stay the same. I also think it's worth pointing out that these model capabilities, I think this is emphasized by Mark, they're changing fast. And so your workflow in 2024 is ancient by 2026, right? And all the work that you do to sort of build scaffolding and other things around your model, you have to be really clever and smart to do some things that are durable, that last sort of the next iteration of Claude or Gemini, or the other models. And so I think the sort of nature of this conversation is likely to be quite different in even 2027. I mean, already the way we're talking about this would have been we wouldn't have had done the experiment. It would have been just sort of retrospective benchmark in 2025. And so I'd urge you, have another one of these in 2027 or 2028. And I think
definitely we will. We already got
asked
to do one in September to follow up in 3 months. So I think we'll definitely do one in 6 months. We have reached the 2:00, and it is me to moderate and cut it off. So I want to give all three of you, if you want to say another 30 seconds, maybe something that you haven't been able to say, and I'll give it up to Mary to then announce all the other sessions that are running. And I totally understand if someone needs to jump off before, because we did reach the hour. Maybe Arjun, for you, if there's anything else you want to share with the audience.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll be very quick. I think it's been emphasized by all three of us. I think AI has tremendous capability to help us in both creating and in evaluating science. But I think the sort of human taste, human decision making, human responsibility remains paramount to me. That's how we implemented our process. I also commend sort of both of my co-panelists here. I think transparency in how we're doing this and rigorously evaluating sort of the quality of these things, both where it goes well, where it falters, I think is going to remain very, very important. And again, the models are going to completely change. So we're going to have to do that again and again and again and again.
Natalie?
Yeah, I think if I could leave with one thing, it would be that at the turn of the year, I would say November and December, with the launch of Gemini 3 and GPT 5.2, we saw some pretty incredible model improvements specifically for scientific peer review and other adjacent tasks, at least on the developer end. And so I would encourage everyone to try out these new models if you haven't in a few months, and just see how they perform on some of your own research, even if it's just published research, just to get a sense of where things are today.
Mark?
Yeah, I just want to end with the importance of the academic publishing workflows that we do have. And even though I'm talking about being very flippant about how AI can come and replace lots of things, I think we should never move away from the importance of having good quality academic research, and the humans who are working on that will need to continue working on that. We just might be more efficient in the way that we do that, which is only for the good of everybody. So I just wanted to make the point that it's exciting times, and the need for people working in the publishing houses has never been more important.
I would also like to thank our platinum sponsor, JAMS, because some of the attendees were sponsored by them, and also Eva Grabaric-Andomska, who I haven't mentioned at the beginning, who was part of our moderating crew here. So Eva, thank you so much. And now that I'm in Zagreb, I hope to see you also in Croatia in the next few days. And I'll leave it now off to Mary, who will tell you of the other sessions that are happening. Thank you all so much again for joining, and especially my dear panelists.
Why do editors love Scholastica's peer review system?
What sets Scholastica apart from other journal management systems is its remarkable ease of use. I appreciate the intuitive interface. Glenn A. Bowen, Section Editor, International Journal of Research on Service Learning and Community Engagement.
Scholastica has made my editorial tasks a breeze. Both manuscript referees and authors have commented on the outstanding platform. Nandita Mitra, Editor-in-Chief, Observational Studies.
Moving to Scholastica has dramatically reduced our time to decision on submitted manuscripts and time to publication of accepted manuscripts. Joshua C. Hall, Editor, Journal of Regional Analysis and Policy.
An intuitive platform with the features you need, like built-in email to streamline communication, powerful submission filters, seamless manuscript transfers, easy configuration and integration options, and more. Ready to learn more? Visit scholasticahq.com.